Hello, everyone. My name is Robin Bauer Kilgo, and we are starting up another hashtag ArcsChat Live, budgeting on a shoestring, excuse me. Couple notes before we start. We will be moderating all of our social media feeds. So we'll be looking at Twitter, Facebook, along with the YouTube chat box. Please use the hashtag ArcsChat for us to follow along. There is going to be about a 20-second delay from when we're actually talking and then when we're looking at everything. So if you type in a question we don't get to you right away, just please let us know. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to John Robinette.
Yeah, I'm John Robinette, and I'm one of the other hosts. And
you throwing it to me?
We have another host.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda. Welcome back to our second ArcsChat YouTube live session.
Yes, we are ready to talk about budgeting. But before we get that, what's going on your way, Amanda? Anything interesting come across your plate?
So many things, but we actually just started an installation this week. And if anyone is familiar with the artist's work, we are doing a large-scale installation of Jennifer Angus's pieces, which are insects that she uses to create textile patterns on walls. And she had a really big show at the Renwick in 2015. This is the largest show to date that she's done so far. So it's super exciting. It's a little weird, but I've learned a lot in the last few days.
Learned a lot about insects, I assume?
Insects, which are not bugs. They're different things. Trust me, we have learned.
What's the difference? Like, you gotta tell us the difference.
What is the difference?
One of the differences is that bugs are insects, but not all insects are bugs. And one of the qualities is that I believe they need to have 6 legs in order to be considered an insect. And they vary in size. Some are as big as my face. Some are as big as my fingernail. I've seen them all up close in person.
Wow.
But it's beautiful. It really is. And I'm so excited for the show to open.
Wow. Speaking of, like, up here in New York, it is stink bug season. So it is just stink bugs everywhere. It's really hard to keep them out of the house. So, that's my insect
insect update.
Do they really stink though, or are they?
If you smash them, they do.
Oh my gosh! I thought love bugs were bad, Robin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to smush them. And the other thing about them is that they are from Asia and have no natural enemies here. So
invasive, fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect storm of bad, but they're innocuous otherwise. But yeah, so.
You all, have you guys heard of love bugs up north? Do you know what a love bug is?
No. Is this a Florida thing? One of your weird Florida things?
Of course.
One of our weird Florida things.
They're the rumor is that they were released from University of Florida as kind of an experiment of some kind. But basically, they're these bugs that just bloom around this time of year, up through middle and central Florida, and they don't do anything. They hatch, they mate, and then they come in swarms. And they stick on the front of your car.
Wow.
And you can't get them off. And it's so bad.
Are they big?
No, they're little. They're joined like
all the time because they're constantly mating. I'm not sure. Or they're just hooked onto each other.
I don't know. But they it's so bad in some parts of the state that when you're driving, you can't see out your windshield. So you have to constantly gross.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious.
That's your Florida bug update.
Yeah.
It's love bug season.
You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome.
Watch what I'm going to do here. Watch this segue. This is pro radio about to happen. So I just got back from a 2-day, I will call it a choreo trip in quotes, just because all I did was I took a cab to Hartford, Connecticut, and then rode on a truck back down into New York, and then rode on a truck from New York to the airport, and didn't even have to get on the plane. And all of this was just, because of indemnity. They needed somebody on the truck. And, but essentially I'm just shocked about the budget for that. So, someone had to pay for that kind of almost meaningless trip, but of course, now that I'm freelance, I'm happy to have the work, but still, you know, and then there were 2 other couriers going on that flight, or maybe even 3, which is also, that's why I didn't have to go on the plane, but you know, still, you know, again, all going to the same show. So, I wonder how they budgeted for that.
Question.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so tell me that was bad.
No, it was good. It was a good segue.
That's why you're here. Prop me up, prop me up.
There you go.
So, yeah, so I guess we should talk about budgets, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I think what you just said kind of slides us into one of the first questions we kind of outlined for today's topic, and talking about the unique challenges we face in developing project or department budgets and the creative ways we find to get kind of the most bang for our buck. With large show, I don't know, I'm assuming it's a large show you did, but obviously it has an important loan with it. It's been indemnified.
Yeah.
And what have you. And when I've worked on projects like that, the budget and planning process is really unique. And sometimes you even do special fundraising for those types of things as well to help support, which without indemnity would also be hard to do because of the insurance.
Right.
I know when I worked at a state institution, in terms of department budgets, we were kind of given a number from our parent organization that we had to figure out how to work within. So when we had larger exhibitions that maybe weren't going to be able to be covered by that, we have to get creative with fundraising and other things. And we worked with, you know, our development department and stuff to kind of compensate for that. But developing a budget to kind of fit within a number is a real challenge.
Right.
Have either one of you guys had that type of experience?
No, you know, I was working for a private collector for the last 9 years, and our budgets were basically, we would sort of pitch them. So we'd say, okay, we need X, Y, and Z to happen. You know, we anticipate, you know, this happening. Our storage contract is coming up, so we're going to have to renegotiate that, and maybe it's going to go up, and we expect, you know, whatever, this type of thing. And so, it wasn't always, you know, we didn't have to work within a ceiling for the budget for our department. So, what about you, Robin? Did you work with people that you probably had various different experiences?
Yeah, I mean, most of our stuff was project based. So like, you know, I worked for a tribal museum. So for collections area, you know, when it came to exhibitions, pretty much the exhibits team would come to us with what they wanted to do. And then we'd say, okay, well, you need to think about conservation treatments if you want to, you know what I mean, do this object or that kind of jazz. When it came to the collection staff, we would look at wide scale projects and try to figure out, okay, how much is it going to cost? And then we'd have to approach, you know, our leadership, and then they'd have to approach tribal council, and then you'd have to go to tribal council for the budget approval each year. So it just kind of depended on what aspect of the collections area you were working on to make how it worked. But it was kind of like what Amanda was saying when it came to the state approved budgets, just because, you know, a tribal government is like it's a county. Well, it's more than it's a weird hybrid of like county, city, you know what I mean? Like government level. So you'd have to approach things like that. Right. And when I first started working at the tribe, it was, oh my God, 2006, which is crazy to think back that far. And we were still kind of in a flush season then. So like if we came up with a project, it was pretty much just like, go for it, kids, and we'd run off. By the time I left, the economy had flipped a little. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot more us having to kind of like, this is going to benefit us because of X, Y, Z, you know what I mean? And all of our stuff, our budget, everything had to tie back to our strategic plan. To show that it was a strategic plan driven goal. It couldn't just be like someone's, you know, just wanted to throw up an exhibit of whatever. You had to be like, well, this is going to match the goal, the objective, which is going to match the goal of our overall strategic plan. Because our leadership was really into that, which I think is good. Because if not, you end up having stuff willy-nilly. So
that's actually why you have a strategic plan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds like you were doing everything right.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes it was hard because you'd have older staff who didn't operate in that view. So you'd have to kind of go against some institutional history a little bit to kind of make them understand that, you know, you could have a really cool idea, but unless you tie it together, it wouldn't move forward. in whatever shape,
Right.
way, shape, or form. So.
If you guys are listening right now and have any thoughts on, working within budgets, and you want to share how you budget in your department, if you are given a number to work within, or if you have my experience where you are proposing your budgets, let us know, and let us know if you have any further questions about that stuff. So who does, well, first off, like, how do you keep track of your budgeting and your expenses? Is it just like, Google or Excel, and is it all on the department head, or who's doing that?
For us, it was mainly in the department head, but that's where I learned the magical power of building formulas in Excel.
Yeah.
to do stuff automatically. But especially
Right.
when I was ending up there, I was head of collections. So for me, it was my responsibility to be like, okay, I'm on budget. These are our projects. Everything's still within a budget framework that we can support. So. But I know there's cooler stuff now. I know people still use Excel, but I know there's cooler.
I was gonna say, if there's cooler stuff, I haven't seen any of it yet.
Right.
It's pretty much still Excel.
Right.
Magic that is Excel.
What are the cooler things that you're talking about?
Oh, I mean, even something as simple as Google Sheets wasn't really around when I was doing it. You know what I mean? Because I went out on my own 7 years ago. So the Google Docs, the whole Google suite was not around. So the idea of having a collaborative sheet that we could all go into and look at the same time, that was like, what is that? That is a mythical thing. We would still bring these giant printouts everywhere, be tracing things with markers and stuff.
Oh,
so
man.
even
this was like 5 years ago. I don't know why I'm saying it like that.
It feels like a different world though, right? Like you just think back, and I'm like, I think back to how I started, and I probably have it in here, but the On the Road Again, the traveling exhibition book that everyone has, there was a printout in there that you could copy and write in, you know what I mean? To keep track of your budget thing.
They're working on a second edition of that right now. And I wonder if it's going to talk about maybe Google Suite.
Or just anything like that. I mean, I think it's the way we approach it is a little different now. You know what I mean? With how we do things. So.
Right.
It's so interesting you mentioned that though, because a lot of projects I was working on before I moved on from the Ringling, we were trying to find like a project management software that we could all use, that we could specifically for exhibitions, because that's the work I did. And our designer was really spearheading at the time. But in those project management software suites, you could have, you could keep track of tasks and all that general stuff, but you could keep track of budget as well. And I think that's a really big selling point, is because it could help us really manage that. Because, when you go in, you're talking about this particular type of project, and you have like, well, we need this, we need this, we need this. But if you're not like looking at your budget in front of your face, those are wonderful, grandiose ideas. But when invoices start rolling in, you start getting at a bottleneck when you spend plenty of money, and you can't, it's just a harder way to manage it. So having it built into your project management software is actually a really neat thing.
For the people that are listening, what are the project management software programs that you're looking at, that you're referring to specifically? Do you know? Do you remember?
Well, I can say the ones that we were looking at, I think it was called Microsoft Group. It was a Microsoft-based program, and I'm going to look it up right now because it's going to bother me if I don't figure it out. Then we actually got it approved in our department budget to buy. Nice. Because it wasn't cheap, which is another interesting ironic thing.
That's the hard thing.
You have to sell them on that. We're going to save X amount of money if we do this.
It wasn't my grand idea to advocate for, so I'm not entirely sure how our designers sold it. But I will say that because of their position, they work with a lot of different software programs to do their job.
Yeah.
So I think because of that, they had like a line item of new software programs they could buy every year, and they're able to squeak it in that way.
Right.
That mythical, I remember us looking for the mythical project management software that would encompass everything, and hearing even back then, like Microsoft OneNote was one thing that you heard people talking a lot about. And then Microsoft Projects, I think, was an actual term that we use. It's all Microsoft stuff.
That's what it's called, Microsoft Project.
Oh, I pulled that out of the back of my head. I'm like, it was called something. Project? I don't know.
Is that one that's still being used today?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Keep
I mean,
it
well,
up.
we just bought it, so hopefully.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Microsoft doesn't do what Google likes to do, where they just randomly stop doing their programs, which I always
We're not bitter about that.
no. What are you talking about?
That's not what happened to, ARC's chat
Whatever.
when we did the one in May and
Whatever, Google. Like, I shouldn't say that as I sit here and say that. Now my email won't work anymore. Like, and I'll be like,
exactly.
They're
No
listening.
Google Docs for you, Robin.
I know exactly.
Yeah, well, well, I mean, even the free ones, like there were, things like Basecamp and Trello and the other aspects of the Google Suite allow a collaborative nature, and you could essentially turn Google Sheets into a checklist of sorts, and so all of that can do project management on a shoestring budget. I mean, you can do so much with these free programs. I use Trello all the time to keep track of all of my various projects. So
Where does Slack, here I have a question for you guys. Where does Slack fit into this? Does Slack help, hinder?
oh yeah,
I don't know Slack very well, so I'm always trying to figure out how it fits into like the software world.
I've got a lot of experience with it. I was working with a team of 2 other people, so there were 3 of us that were essentially the department, and we were rarely in the same place at the same time. So Slack allowed us to keep track of our projects in sort of a chat format. And the goal of Slack is essentially to eliminate interdepartmental email. So you never run into the situation where like the idea is to avoid things like, oh, you sent me that. Was that an email? Was that a text? Or was that a phone call? Did you just tell me that? So you have it all in writing in one location, and it's searchable.
Gotcha.
And you can archive it if you have a paid subscription. I think you have to pay for it to be able to archive the conversations in the same way that you would archive email. But you transfer documents, you can use hashtags, you can add somebody if you want them to specifically address a certain thing. And you can do pretty much everything you need, minus the archiving, in the free version. I'm a big fan of it. And lately, there have been people using it as a collaborative tool. So I don't know if you saw on the ARCS forum, people that are interested in time-based media, someone started a group on Slack to share thoughts and concerns about time-based media, specifically about time-based media, and that was a Slack group. I'm associated with a co-working space in the town where I live, and they started a Slack group so that they could keep everybody informed about the times that the space was rented out, or just updates about the space. So people are using it in other ways besides just within a department or within an institution. So I find it pretty useful, although I've heard there's been there's been some kickback about it recently where you're like, oh, you're giving this company all this information about your institution, and you can consolidating it in one spot for them to utilize the data. I don't know that they do that, but that is a concern that's been expressed. So it'd be worth researching, I guess, but as a tool, I find it pretty useful, and again, cheap or free. So
very cool. Thank you. Yeah. I just have had a lot of people being like Slack, and I'm like, I feel like I'm just old enough where I'm like, I feel too old to learn a different program, but I know I'm gonna have to. So I'm just
come
like,
on, Robin, I'm older than you.
I gotta keep up. My joke is always I have to keep up for when they implant the chips in my children's heads. I'll understand what is happening. So I have to
you gotta know where to scan the barcode.
Exactly. Like, gotta keep up with the tech to know what's
happening. We're talking about a lot of really good resources. I think what we'll try and do is collect this information, and if it sounds good to you guys, we can list it in the description box below on YouTube.
Yeah.
When we post the podcast after the live session, so people can go back and have a chance to look through some of the things we talked about and do a little research for themselves. Maybe these things will work for them as well.
Right. I think noting the tools is super important, and that's kind of why we're here, because I think these are ways to help you save money, and and even learning them to a greater degree, like, Excel, for example, it's been around forever. Everybody has it. And maybe it just requires understanding how to really, kit out a spreadsheet so that you can build a model. And so you change one number and it changes all the numbers. And then how, ordering this much of X product affects the entire thing, so, or adding one more, art handler for the install can screw the whole thing up. If maybe it's just about understanding those things at a greater level, and it's
you mentioning art handlers is interesting, because when it comes to salaries, how have you guys looked at those in the budgets? Because I know when you're budgeting on a shoestring, it's the idea that you use in-house staff is what you try to do.
Right.
So hopefully your salaries aren't there, but what if you need to get like external conservators work or things like that? Like how have you guys worked around those issues or those problems, or have you?
I always wanted, and I don't know if they quite got to the point, but I would like to do it moving forward on budget planning. I just started a new position, so I came in right after the fiscal year started. I had no input on my budget this year, but I promised you I will next year. But one of the things I want to qualify is staff time, the value of staff time versus the value of contract time. And one of the things I learned a great deal from the preparator at the Ringling is he really made an effort to show the value of doing things in-house and the savings that would come from it, as opposed to having things outsourced. I mean, there's other benefits as well. We used to always outsource our framing, which, required more movement of the artwork, off-site locations, other people storing and being responsible for it. So because we were able to move that on-site, obviously the registration staff was way happier, but we saved exponentially in terms of cost.
But did that require working extreme hours?
No, we really tried to develop a culture that, project management was a big part of it, making sure we were staying on task and we had people to help us stay on task. It was a team effort, but also developing a culture where like there's a work-life balance. Right. And I can say, at least working at a state institution, that's a bit imposed on you, which is a good thing. We should all have work-life balance. And I'm currently working at a private museum. And I was just telling Robin and John that there's so many differences, and work-life balance is different as well. So it wasn't a big change like that, I would say.
Right. Yeah, because I think I know part of the impetus for a lot of people, like, there's been a lot of unionizing of preparators lately, especially around New York. And I think a lot of the argument is around that. It's like, okay, well, we can't be working 12-hour days, just because you want to save on the budget. You don't want to contract out this stuff. And it's also, if you are doing that, it also becomes a risk to the objects you're installing. So, people get tired and they don't concentrate as much, and you lose focus and accidents happen. So, so it's good to hear that, at least in your case, you're not actually overextending everybody by keeping it in-house. So.
Well, and I have to, maybe this is just, I'm tooting my own horn here, but I would like to think that the planning that went into these projects and the scheduling that went in did a lot to help manage that. Because things are always going to come up, right? Expenses are going to come up. Yeah. Linking it back to budgeting, we always made a line of contingency in our budgets for projects, and even within our department. Actually, I don't know if we did within our department budget, but for every project, we had like a 10% line of contingency funds, because something's going to go wrong.
Right.
You have to think about, like, what about current situation is trying to figure out, we have a staff member who's sick and they're not here to do work, and we're a smaller staff. So missing one person is a huge impact. So now we have to pay for contract work, and that's not something we budgeted for.
Right.
So moving forward, having a contingency line in projects will really help. Because if we come under budget, that's fantastic. That's money back into the pool for others. But if we need it, we really need to have it there.
Right. Right. Super important. I think planning can't be emphasized enough in terms of saving money. I can't tell you how many times I would do a courier trip, and I'd buy the ticket was bought for me the week of the travel, the week of
Ooh.
the trip. And like, I mean, this is the opposite of saving money. And and I mean, if you can get, I mean, and obviously you have to get that flight because the cargo is booked on that flight. So you really have no options. And maybe sometimes the only thing that's left is a business class ticket, and I don't even require it. So you end up paying 3 times what you should be paying. And that I'm just one of the couriers for the one of the lenders, you know what I mean? So there could be, as many, I've been on shows there's 30 plus lenders or couriers. So planning, in advance is so important. And sometimes, you don't get object lists until late, and, you have to respond and react, and, whatever, you get thrown curveballs by other people or whatever, maybe it's your fault too, but,
I do no wrong, John. What could you mean?
I mean, I could drink from the wrong end of the water bottle. So
There you go.
but yeah, I mean, that was actually something somebody else brought up on Twitter when we were asking for questions, just like the importance of planning, just can't be said enough. It can't be emphasized enough. So, but I mean, do you, in terms of, we're talking about staffing and everything, do your departmental staff salaries, do they come out of your departmental budgets, or does that come from a higher administrative level?
Everywhere I've worked, that's a different level. You know what I mean? Like it's a different process. And actually when you find the need for a new staff member, that has its own budgeting thing. We're kind of like what you guys were talking about, where if you realize you're out, this actually happened to us when I worked at the tribe. We were looking at conservator costs, and we realized with the amount of conservation work we were doing, if we got an in-house conservator, even with the amount of money that would cost, it would save us money on the back end.
Right.
So, but it took a while to convince people of that fact. And that's you being a good advocate for your collections and its needs, and kind of what you think it might need in the future. But it was a separate, like, you basically had to approach people and said, hey, I need a FTE, a full-time equivalent, to do it. Because that's the thing that when I was younger and first learning it, I always thought, okay, well, it's a $50,000 budget or salary. That's what it costs, right? And it's like, no, you have to add on healthcare. You have to add on, and all this other stuff. So like a $50,000 position is really probably more like an $80,000 to $100,000 position for your institution.
Right.
So yeah, that was something to always consider as well. So
yeah, that was the same experience I always had. It was really challenging working for a university that was funded by the state of Florida, because there are just more levels of proof, I guess, you have to show in order to advocate for the position. And there's so much need when you're part of a larger organization, that justifying the priority for your department within your museum, within your university, is just like layers and layers of effort. So if you're lucky like we were, we had a great HR person who understood what those needs were at the university level and could help us translate that. And it still took years. There were years before we were able to add some positions, but given that type of organizational structure, I think we actually did pretty well for ourselves in getting enough staff. But it kind of circles back to what Robin was mentioning with linking things back to your strategic plan. Advocacy for your budget, maybe it is linking it back to your strategic plan. Maybe it is linking it back to your organizational goals, your department goals, to justify why you need the things you need. Maybe it's knowing what the department manager is looking for and what they need, and phrasing it in a way that makes sense to them. You're all part of a team. You're all part of an institution working together, ultimately towards the same goal. But knowing how to verbalize effectively what you need is a real skill, I would say, in advocating for your budget.
Right. And I think you hit on an important topic, is like the people that approve these budgets, they all respond to different things. Some people, it might just be pure numbers. Can we afford it? Or like, how long does it take to pay for itself? So if you can amortize, all right, say in 5 years, this thing will pay for itself, but it's to pay it back, whatever, it's going to take a few years. Some people respond to that. Some people respond to, this is cultural heritage that we're preserving. This is history of humankind, whatever, make it sound grandiose in that respect. But whatever, you have to appeal to people the way they need to be appealed to. So, and know who you're talking to, in other words. So.
And another tool that I really like, we've talked about like Google Docs and spreadsheets and stuff. Google Docs actually has some really great templates, but even Microsoft programs, if you're using Excel or you're using Word, they already have templates that have been made.
Right.
I'd use one for my timesheet. I'm a salaried employee, but I still like delegate the project. Like, what am I doing? I'm spending this much time on emails, this much time on registration work, this much time on loans. I try to qualify and quantify my efforts. Because I want to be able to come back and say, like, this is where I'm spending my time.
Right.
To my supervisor. How do you want me to reprioritize? What's our priority? How can I shift this to meet your priority? Or I'm spending all my time doing this one thing. We need another employee. I can't do anything else because I'm spending all day answering email. Those things are already built in. I'm sorry?
That's such a great tool, especially if you want to justify, say, a raise down the road.
Oh yeah. Why do you think I count my time?
Yeah, exactly. Or to know, like, if you see somebody that is working consistently, 50, 60 hours a week, or you find yourself doing that, you're like, what exactly do I do? So, so especially in office culture where you can easily just get caught up catching up about the weekend or whatever, it's so much, chewing the fat time. So.
But it can just be really intimidating when you come to think, well, how am I supposed to show this? How am I supposed to, graph my time? Well, a lot of that's already made for you. If you just want to shuffle through some templates in either of those programs, you can find something that works for you. And then it's already programmed and done. I mean, you could still learn how to use Excel if you want to, but you could also do it the easy way.
Of course. And there's so many that are free online that they're not just within the Excel or the Microsoft universe. They are made by other institutions. So with that in mind, like if you do find that in your instance, for example, like you're spending a lot of time on, remedial tasks, you say, we need a intern or a volunteer. Is that a way to manage that? I mean, it's in theory, and it should be a budgeted item. It should be paid for, as we all know.
Well, a couple of things, if I can get on my soapbox.
Go for it.
If you're fortunate enough to work at an institution that provides fellowships or paid internships, absolutely, those are fantastic things that you can draw people in for and you can compensate their time appropriately for. If you are a blessed person who gets a wonderful volunteer who gives their time and does good work and is excited about that work, then you are a lucky individual, and I would put them to work. I think that can go a really long way towards helping out on projects. I know in my own mind, there's a lot of backlog data entry that needs to happen into our collections management system. We just have like paper files somewhere in some abyss that the new person who has no institutional knowledge knows nothing about, and it needs to be in the database. The fact that it isn't is a problem, and I could use a volunteer to help me do that because it's simple data entry. And the benefit of that is it's just time given. I mean, you still count that time, it's in-kind time, but I also think that you could show and keep track of that, document that, and use that to prove and justify you need a paid position as well. And we have this volunteer spending this much time doing these X, Y, and Z things, and this intern graciously decided to give their time because we can't afford to pay them, or we don't have the opportunity to pay them right now. And look at what we need.
Right.
That would be my angle on that.
Right, for sure.
I mean, I know with my experience, it's been really hard. And I had a weird experience because the museum I worked with was in the middle of nowhere. Like, if you looked at a map of Florida, there's the big lake in the middle, and we were right below the lake. And Florida is populated by the coast. So like there was no one near us. So trying to get volunteers was always really hard. We got interns, but at the time, this is again the late O's, The idea of a paid intern was something still kind of really unheard of. Even now it's getting battled in. And I think that would be a really good way to help your budget is if you could put certain things in for paid interns to show like it's a little less money to get these guys to do these remedial tasks. But you still need to be careful to make sure you can depend on them to be there. Because that was always our hard thing. With volunteers, they could, I don't want to say flake out, but some life can happen. You know what I mean? And that volunteer you were depending on might not show up every day. So I think the idea of trying to build in internships, paid internships to your budget would be great for all reasons. Save some money and also give those kids, I hate saying kids, makes me feel like a the chance to like gain that work experience. We all need to get jobs, right? That's the thing, we need to get a job, is we need the work experience. Right. So I think that's something. And if you have a good internship core, like go for it. You know what I mean? But you just really need to make sure you can depend on those people to show up and fulfill that job. Because if they don't show up, then you're stuck with it. And then you end up having to play that game of catch up. You know what I mean? With all your stuff. So I think that's something to think about as well when you're depending on interns and volunteers, for sure.
Right. Well, and the other thing is like, the one thing I always wondered is like, can you fundraise specifically for that? But it's like nobody wants to sponsor. You don't have the John Doe memorial registrar position or internship position in the way that people have directors or scholars and things like that. So can you say solicit a grant for doing all the data entry that needs to be done to bring your collection up to your collections management system up to date? Or can you solicit a sponsorship or an endowment for an internship position? Are these legit things? Do people do this?
Yeah.
For grants, yeah. Like you could totally put in something that says, you know what I mean? Like we want a position. Usually it's matching. So you say like, I'll put half the money up if you put the other half money up.
Right.
But yeah, I think grants you kind of have to, you know what I mean? Especially if it's a backlog project, holy Moses. Yeah, you need to show that you're going to be educating people and also using them to do stuff. I mean, that's for sure. Do that.
Well, I have a thing to add to that, but one of the beautiful things about putting data into your database is that if you have a way of making your database available to the public, searchable on your website, things like that, then there's a whole level of access that you can give to the whole free world, not just your community. And that's always a really wonderful thing. And even one of the big projects a colleague of mine at the Ringling really worked towards was putting our entire collection online, regardless of whether or not there was information in the record. If it was just bare bones, maybe it didn't even make sense.
Right.
We chose to just put it all out there. I cannot tell you the numbers and feedback we got. It was tenfold. I would say once a week we were getting emails to our department email going, I'm a researcher in this field and I saw this online and I did this. I have information to share with you, or I want to know more about these. I mean, it was a great turnaround. It was a really tangible thing that we could see happen just by putting the information out there. So if you can get a grant to support that, accessibility and access is a wonderful thing. And there is payback, at least in that regard.
Right.
But in terms of like sponsorship, so one of the things that we have at my current job is we actually have a donor who's been a really long time supporter of the museum who has sponsored a contract position.
Ooh.
Which is really interesting. And it's opened my eyes a bit to other things that are collection-based things that could have a donor support. And I mean, I even asked if our development team could find people who are interested in technology and if they'd be willing to support more licenses for our database. Because right at the moment we have 3, but we have like 7 people using the database and we're constantly needing to kick each other off so we can do work. But if someone is really interested in technology and accessibility and information access, that might be right up their alley. So I'm always trying to encourage our development team and my supervisors to think outside the box. Like, people have a variety of interests, variety of things they want to support, and this might be something they're interested in doing. Maybe they really like African art. Maybe they're willing to sponsor us a contract registrar and a scholar so that we can actually figure out what our African art collection holdings are.
That reminds me of a session I saw years ago at the Florida Association of Museums where they talked about microfunding for projects. So you would identify a project at your institution. It could even be like new boxes or something, right? And then you start either not Kickstarter, because I think they're evil now, but like some other platform that like basically you say you're trying to do $25,000 to do boxes, and people just give little bits of money, $2,500, little bits of money to build up to that. And I think when it comes to budgeting, when you're looking at your budget and it's super tight, if you can identify a small project and figure out those donors or people who will give 10, 20 bucks here or there to build out that project, you could actually see some of your little passion projects get fulfilled, which I think would be a great, for sure.
That's a cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had an interesting question come in via Twitter on this topic of grants. It's from Melanie Neal at Melanie Neal 3. Curious if there are any tips on managing the actual workload on collections projects funded by grants. As grants are not guaranteed, we often have our workload for the year planned out when, surprise, we get that grant and we have to quickly re-strategize. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, if you get the money funded, you kind of have to run with it.
Yeah,
exactly. I was going to say, I think that re-strategizes it for you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Unfortunately, or fortunately.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say that just happened. You know, there's so many priorities, things that I have, things that my colleagues have for our department. But we just had a donor come in that said, well, I want to do this. And we're like, well, it's not a major priority, but it's what you want and what you're willing to support. You know what? Let's just do it. Mm-hmm. When are we going to have this opportunity again?
Right. Right. I guess that's the question, is like, you know, if, are you completely switching gears and, you know, like you're saying, you know, all of a sudden this thing that wasn't a priority becomes a priority. So yeah, I guess you take it as it comes. So, I mean, I wonder, well, I mean, look, if you solicited a grant, and this would be the big difference between, say, a donor. If you solicited the grant, it's obviously a priority. So I would think that it's probably not a huge leap. I guess, yeah, you would probably have in some, I would hope, you know, maybe Melanie, you can respond and let us know exactly what your thoughts on this, because like you must have on some level a contingency plan, like, okay, if we do get the grant, then we will have to, you know, hire this person because it would then be paid for, and then we could, you know, fulfill X project, etc. But I guess you probably also don't want to go, you know, full blown into planning for something that you may or may not get. So
right. I know that whenever we did it, we look across our collections and maybe have 5 or 6 projects that we knew we could work on. And I'm talking outside of exhibit schedule. Like I'm talking like, you know, we want to rehouse this collection. We want to digitize this collection. We want to, I don't know, do something with that, you know, at least make it look pretty, you know, like chaotic on a table somewhere in the vault. So with those collections, you kind of have an idea of what stage you were at. Then if you got that influx, sometimes you had to drop project, which, you know, out for a little bit and pick up that other one and just start running with it as you could, because that was the time you had the money. We'd have that in the tribe. I mean, all of a sudden you'd be like, someone would get really into a project and you get an influx of money and you'd be like, guess we're working on the digitization project now for the next 3 months. You know what I mean? And you kind of move stuff around and work on that. But going back to what you were talking about with planning, making sure you've done your initial planning phase and making sure that your staff and your budget and everything can support those projects is incredibly important as you're approaching getting them done. So that's something to think about as well. There's a lot of like background stuff you usually got to do before you get that level. At least in my
I mean, yeah, I mean, in this question, for example, the real question was, are there tips on managing the actual workload and collections that are funded by grants? And you know, that is like the planning we're talking about. It's maybe some of the project management tools, I would think, is part of it.
I would wonder if also there are like milestones you want to meet. You know how like when you do strategic planning, it's
Right.
like, here are the milestones you want to get in year one. Maybe for grant-based projects, initial planning or as you go planning, maybe having milestones you want to meet in the timeline in which you want to try and get those on might help you also figure out how to plug in and manage the workload. One thing that I really love is having a department calendar that everybody uses in the department. So we know like we've got this install happening here, we're doing a change out here, Bobby Joe is out this week, all those things. That's also a nice like bird's eye view of everything you've got going on and where you can plug in things that you know you and your entire department can work on together. So maybe having something like that already established can help you blend those two things, the grant-based project and your general workload, or maybe just your grant workload.
Do you guys keep a paper or digital department calendar?
Digital department calendar. It's in Outlook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's
I don't like paper. I mean, I like paper, but I don't like paper.
kind of like paper, Amanda.
I love works on paper.
Yeah, there you go. I do digital calendars. I mean, I have like a paper to-do list, which is like, you know, how I track things. But I think when you're working across teams, it's all digital nowadays. Some places I've walked into still do the giant wipe erase board that you'll see for project management, but I'm seeing that less and less, I think, in the past.
And the problem with that is that you can't plan a year in advance with that.
There's some
So
big calendars out there, John.
Just an entire office.
Erase boards.
Giant calendars out there that I'm just like, wow. Like, that is impressive.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the digital one because then you can keep various ones. You can keep one for, you know, holidays. You can keep one for your immediate department. You can keep one for all staff, and you know, you can see what you want to see at that time. So I think you know, that is a huge thing. I think milestones is a pretty critical thing because it allows you to do so many things. Obviously, you know, once you set a milestone, you can figure out how to achieve it. You can also justify the grant, of course. You can also link it to your strategic plan. And all of these things can, and obviously it's a budget review point. So you say, you know, at this point, we will, you know, what's the next step, you know, and, you know, at a milestone sort of forces you to reevaluate where you are. So yeah, it's a great tip. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess we already talked about the technology and everything. Have you guys figured out any like ways to creatively what's the term, like budget tricks? You know, I like this is kind of a weird one, I guess, but you know, in a way that, you know, say hire a volunteer, quote unquote, hire a volunteer to do that might be a sneaky way to, you know, help execute something in a dubiously ethical way to fulfill a project. Do you guys have any other like tricks that people might want to try?
Reuse as much stuff as you possibly can from previous
Right.
I just hoard tissue at this point.
We used to
I can use it for something.
We used to have a stack of blue that would just get progressively smaller and smaller.
Like, I can do something with this.
Do something with this. You can make it into a thing. You know, that was big. Keeping eyes out for sales on things. You know, Gaylord every once in a while would do a sale. Getting to
packing materials are like a huge expense that kind of like hit on that. Yeah, I mean, you know, old plastic can become a dust cover, for example. Things like that.
Drop cloths in the galleries.
Yep.
Yeah.
We would reuse old, like, what am I thinking of? Like foam core for everything. Like sometimes, you know, you could flip it on the other side and use it for stuff. It was just anything that you could possibly redo, which is very green of us before green became like a crazy thing. But yeah, we would do a lot of that. And also, you know, there's the whole idea of consortiums too, like getting together with a couple people and trying to get discounts for things.
Right.
So if you're ordering boxes, you know, like if you look at the prices in Gaylord for boxes, the more you buy, kind of the cheaper per price it goes. So if you know if someone else who could use it and ordering a bigger amount, that was something we'd do a lot back in the day. What else?
Do you, but the consortium made me think of something that I think people don't do enough of, and that's negotiate with their vendors. And I think that, pretty much you should negotiate everything, especially if it's a vendor that you use a lot. But I mean, do you guys negotiate stuff? Like if you're hiring the same trucking company, are you negotiating your rates or any of that stuff?
I don't think I've ever tried to negotiate a shipping estimate. I've been desperate and told shippers, I can't afford anything. What can you do for me?
Yeah. That's negotiation.
I guess so. It's all, I don't like doing it because if I feel like I'm putting all my cards out there, and also, you build professional relationships with these people. I don't ever want to make them feel I've taken advantage of them.
Right.
But sometimes you are just out of luck. So
right.
that's one way to do it.
Right.
I feel like the one thing that I've been successful at is like shopping around.
Mm-hmm.
If we talk about supplies, I really like to shop around because I'll order, like, I need virgin plastic. I do not get that from your standard places. I get it from like Discount Visqueen. It's the same plastic I need. It's good quality, but I'm telling you, it's 50% less.
Yeah.
But I have never like had the gall to negotiate. But you make a really good point, John, because if you're doing a big project, or you're moving a lot of things, or maybe you're traveling a show, trying to work something out that's reasonable with the vendor you're utilizing for that project makes sense. I don't know why.
Right.
Well, I mean, lots of times, and I'm sure you've been in this position, Amanda, you have to get more than one quote, right? Like when you're building, you have to be like, I got a quote from this person, I got a quote from this person. I will, and still do feel very comfortable going back to the more expensive people and going, hey, these people give me a lesser quote. You know what I mean? Can you match it? Or can you meet us halfway? Or can you help us out a little bit? That's even from doing stuff around our house. You know what I mean? Like I've gotten non-shy about doing that and just being like, can you give us a break? Or, you are our preferred vendor, but
we also don't know if the vendors are giving us a rate expecting us to negotiate, and then when you don't, you're like, they're probably just cheering in the background.
I feel so swindled right now.
Yeah.
Most of the vendors, most of them are very fair, or they would give you reasons as to why they couldn't.
Right.
I know. I used to run into a big problem because the tribe I worked for was a gaming tribe. So Seminoles have the Hard Rock casinos, and a lot of people would be like, "What about that gaming money?" And I'd be like, "I'm not. The museum is not getting."
Yeah, totally separate.
It's going other. That's going to, very rightfully so, healthcare for the tribal members and infrastructure for the tribal reservation lands and stuff. Like, we are a small little corner of that pie. You know what I mean? So sometimes being kind of frank with people about your situation can help with getting rates down as well.
Yeah. Well, coming from the private collection world, everyone would just kind of come to us and say, you got money, and, we also had a budget too. And, we were under constant pressure to not get taken advantage of. And, at some point, you compromise. You're not just like saying lower, lower, lower. I need this to be lower. And sometimes you have to give a little and say, hey, I'm willing to sacrifice paint on the outside of my crates in order to get this lower, for example. But I think that you owe it to yourself and your institution to try and do that, especially if you're going to be working with these people. Now, A, don't rely too much on one vendor, and B, they know that you're bidding this stuff out, and they should know that, and so yeah, you should be protecting yourself in that respect. So
but, sometimes too you run into the problem where there's only so many vendors in your area.
Right.
So
yeah,
they know that too.
Right. So it's that's also kind of personal relationships too. We talk about that a lot, is getting to know people.
Right.
When they come to the conference in a month, going up and meeting the people at the shippers, and what I mean, like being like, hey, I work at this place. If they put a face to a name, that might help out in the relationship and the wiggle room they have too.
Right.
So,
I've heard
That's my
But-
subtle reminder that the conference is in like a month. like it's coming down the pipe.
Well, I've heard of institutions like museums where they know that they have a preference to work with X company, right? And they say, hey, look, I can guarantee you that, I will use all of these services, approximately this amount. This is like getting a room rate at a hotel for a conference, for example. You're like, I'm going to guarantee you this amount of work, but I need you to come down on the price, around this much, right? And as a result, they're getting a lot of work out of it. So, and it's almost like, and to know that it's guaranteed, that's a bonus for them. So, so they might be able to do that. So, as a technique, that might be one way to go about it. So, again, you're limited, if they say, well, I don't need to because, I'm the only guy in the area. So, that is that is possibly a response. And but if you have if they have competition, yeah, it's a way to go, but you are sort of putting your fish in that basket.
For sure.
So
another thing that I was thinking about to kind of get the most bang for your buck out of your budget is if you do have other departments at your institution, we work really closely with our facilities department. And one of the things that's actually coming up for us is we're getting to the point where our lights and our track fixtures are getting old and they need to be replaced. And typically those minor replacements come out of our department budget, but because it's going to be a big overhaul and we're going to be investing over periods of time, it's actually something that we're trying to collaborate with our facilities department on so that no one budget is getting totally drained for this one thing, but we are kind of joining forces to help pay for things. And that might be a way, if you can collaborate with other departments at your institution, try and get some things done that maybe you couldn't otherwise independently.
yeah, that's a good call.
Then also, I know this is maybe not something that everyone's comfortable with, but if it's ever an appropriate scenario, one of the things that I thought was really generous of the Ringling when I worked there is we would always offer to share shipments for shows. We lent a lot, so it was a very common thing we did. But we're all sending paintings to X, Y, and Z cargo facility, but they all got to come back this way to the East Coast. Well, anyone can ride on the truck with our crate, or our crate can go on anyone else's truck if they're comfortable with that. I mean, that's a great way to save a lot because exclusive transit can be really pricey.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sharing couriers whenever possible, all of those things are massive things. And, there's been a lot of courier initiatives specifically regarding that topic, because it is kind of ridiculous that you're going to send, 3 or 4 couriers on the same plane. And especially if the works are not specialized, they don't need super special attention. They're not super fragile. So yeah, sharing those expenses is a big deal. So I want to circle back to our grant conversation because Melanie responded. She said, she had asked about project management with a grant, and she said, I think I'm thinking of how the grant project becomes fit in among other things that must get done, exhibits, other commitments, etc. As you all said, the grant does reprioritize things for you, but it still feels a bit like learning to juggle.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it'll probably always be a bit of a juggle, but I'm gonna go back to my original comment of keeping a department calendar or some other type of master calendar where you know what your shows are, your other projects or priorities are, because that will show you the gaps that you can fill things in order to get your grant complete or to keep up with your grant. And again, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you have a grant calendar and you figure out how to fit in everything else around it.
Right. I mean, and also we never really fundraise as departments, do we? Like, and I kind of imagine this fantasy world where, like registrars can go out and solicit donors to do this stuff, but it all tends to go through other people that I guess are specialized in that. But yeah, it's like, yeah, having like, if it were me, I would have like a Trello board with like, all right, these are the things that I'd like for my department, and maybe this is not possible this year. Maybe this is a 5-year goal. And this one, however, this could be done now. So I'm going to pitch that for my budget for next year. And, but that way I always know, like I'm keeping a running checklist that's short, medium, and long term of things that I would like for the department. And that would just be like one list on the Trello board, if you understand how that works. But
yeah, we did that. I mean, we had that at the tribe where we had short-term, midterm, and long-term goals. And that was actually what was really cool. Is, you know, when I came back years later, I saw one of the long-term goals come into fruition. Like I was like, oh my God, it happened. You know what I mean? Because they went out and got a grant and they were able to do all this background work. And that's when, so the museum is the Apatiki, which is Seminole Tribe of Florida. And a couple of years ago, I guess 2 years ago, they got a big IMLS grant and got all new shelving for the old archives. It was all pretty compressed shelving compared to what we used to have. And when I walked in there, I was like, oh my God, it's like what we dreamed of back in the day.
Was it like, did you hear music in the background?
I did. It was crazy. I was like, oh my God. Like, it was just cool because, you know, I had seen it when stuff was still stored in like plastic bags thrown up on top of shelves. And now it's like compressed and pretty. And I was just like, this is beautiful. But that took a lot of years of us, you know, little budgeted projects that built up to this giant budgeted project that involved a grant. So, but it took a while. That's for sure.
I would also add that I think that everybody outside of your department needs to also know what's on your wish list, because they might have things that maybe your project can piggyback on, or you could collaborate, or do like you guys both mentioned earlier, where you have joint projects with whether it's a different department or another institution. So if everybody knows that your what your priorities are, then maybe you can work together on that, or they can give you tips, or they can send you money. They're like, oh, this donor can help you with that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So it's already 9 o'clock.
It's 9 o'clock.
My word. Any other parting thoughts?
I think this is,
as you mentioned, I think we're gonna put some notes in the YouTube description, and we are also gonna put this out as a podcast. The goal is to put this out the Friday after. So this Friday coming up, our goal is to put the previous chat about the conference and this one up. So look out for that. And then we'll be like a fully formed podcasting institution here for registrars, for everybody, but about us. So yeah, that's what's going on. Any other final thoughts, you guys?
I think budgeting is always going to be something we got to deal with. No one has a free ticket.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's something, and I had to learn it on the job, to be honest. And experience. I never took a class in certificates or grad school that showed me how to budget. Like, it was just me figuring it out and talking to people, you know what I mean, who've done it before.
I'd be curious to know if people that are taking museum studies now are getting this information.
Very much so. I did not have it. So I know that's for sure.
Or are there classes now available through some of the programs that have like museum study and other programs that are available for continuing professional development? If they have a course specifically on budget management,
right,
that would be incredibly valuable. I mean,
where's our museum study guy that was always with us on Twitter? Chime in, like tag us and let us know if you offer something like that.
Or we could send up to the ARCS Education Committee for an idea for a webinar or a workshop too. Would be a good thing.
Get that funded.
Get that thing funded.
Get that funded.
Do it.
So, all right, we can work our Excel spreadsheet and use our Trello board and make it happen. So
exactly.
Well, thanks again, you guys, for tuning in on a Tuesday night and talking shop. So like I said, we'll put this out as a podcast ASAP.
And I think next month, because it was going to float over the conference, we will not be doing the live stream during the scheduled time because we have the conference happening, correct? Or am I
correct? But we will be putting out podcasts, one of which will be a panel discussion with us and hopefully other people with the keynote speaker, Joan Baldwin from Leadership Matters. We will have her on the podcast as well. So that will be an exciting thing that will probably come out just after the conference. But we're also hoping to maybe put out some smaller podcasts throughout the conference as well.
Yep. So keep an eye on the feeds from November 7th to 9th for all sorts of chaos. If you haven't already, download the conference app, go to Google Play or Apple Store, search for 2019 ARCS Conference, get it. There's stuff happening. Even now, people are posting on the app. So, yes. So,
doing that right now.
get it. Please.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks. See you soon.
Bye.